Welcome to the Fence and Deck Mastery Podcast, where we discuss cutting-edge techniques, industry trends, and business insights to take your fence or deck company to the next level and dominate your competition. What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Fence and Deck Mastery Podcast. I'm your host, Alex Danner, and also the founder of Fence and Deck Marketers. If you've listened to the podcast before, you've seen we're doing all kinds of different types of episodes. We've got a lot of clients that come on here. We have a lot of industry experts, and today that's exactly what we're going to be doing. I did bring on an amazing guest for you that is an industry expert and somebody that I've met very recently in a place that is very far away, and it's, I think, the exact opposite time as it is here. But Simon is in Australia, and he's the owner of a fencing business called North Coast Fencing. And he also owns The Profitable Fencer, which is doing some great things. It's a fencing coaching group, which he'll elaborate on and do a much better job explaining here in a second. But Simon, thank you for agreeing to do the podcast with me. How's it going, man?
Hey, Alex, how are you, dude? Thanks for bringing me on to your podcast. And yeah, mate, great to catch up again.
Yeah, absolutely. And Simon and I met, I think it was 2 weeks ago, and I forget how it kind of started, to be honest, but we got connected in one way or another on Facebook, and I saw what he was doing, and a little bit about his coaching business and everything he had going on. So I was like, this is perfect. Let me set up a call. And he shared an amazing story about his past with the fencing industry, and then also up till today what he's working on now. But like I said, I'll make sure he's the one that tells that. He'll do a much better job. But he has been doing coaching and been in the fencing business for about 30 years. But Simon, if you wouldn't mind, could you just tell me a little bit, introduce yourself, tell me a little bit about yourself, kind of your story, the history that you have in the fencing industry, maybe a little bit about your fencing business that you have.
Yeah, sure, Alex. Hey, guys, yeah, my name's Simon, Simon Davis, and I'm based in Australia, in New South Wales, Australia, up near a little place called Lismore, and little rural setting. So I think the town is about 40,000 people roughly, and I've been in the game, fencing game, for close to 30 odd years, running my own business for 25 years, I dare say. Like a lot of your guests, Alex, I suppose, I'm a third generation fencer. My dad was a fencer, my grandfather, back in the day, and back in the day when they didn't have all the equipment and the tools, and had to do everything by hand, and that was sort of in the city, in a base Sydney, Australia, where they started doing a lot of project homes and things like that. So they were doing more timber fencing, old school style. And I moved to the country, 30 odd years ago, and was working met a girl, got married, had kids, did all the family stuff. But I was working as a maintenance man at a local hospital, and I couldn't survive trying to pay the mortgage, trying to pay the bills, and everything else on a government wage. So I started fencing on weekends, and it's really funny because as a kid, I used to get dragged to school, dragged out of school with my old man, and had to work on weekends, carrying palings or pickets around. And in Australia, we use a lot of hardwood, so it was really heavy for me, and blisters, and the old fellas in the old school, they were basically, if it was stinking hot, they were still working, and if it was pouring rain, they were still working. And it was I can remember doing one job with Dad, actually, with the old hammer and nail bag on. It was pouring rain. His bag was filling up full of water as he's getting nails out. So he cut a slot in the bottom of the leather pouch to let the water drain out so he could keep working. But how times have changed. But I moved to the country and started fencing on weekends, and it was something really didn't want to do, and I sort of fell into it. Realized that through the trainings that I had with my father and grandfather, and they were two old dudes that were really hard to work with, especially if they were on the same site. I was Johnny in the middle and getting yelled and roared at to bring stuff to them either ends of the jobs because they'd work either ends, and it was fun times. But I started fencing on weekends and got myself sort of going, and I think back when I first started, I was doing a lot of colour bond fencing and colour bond fencing, steel fencing, like corrugated iron, similar trim deck and corrugated iron, things like that. So I started doing that, and back then my pay rate was $10 a metre. So that's what 3.5 feet, 3.3 feet, I think, for you guys. So I was doing that, and as we were working through those parameters, it was like $10 a meter. I would do 50 meters a week back then by hand, and that would beat my government wage. So I decided to leave and get out and have a crack on my own. Well, within a month, I was doing about 50 meters every day and a half, 2 days on my own. So I sort of just started building the business from there. And my business is called North Coast Fencing. We turned that into a company called North Coast Fencing and Contractors Proprietary Limited. And that ran for, as a sole trader, I was for about 10 years. And I turned the company, ran it for about 9 years. Got up to a stage where I had about 20 staff, had about 10 teams of subcontractors running. We were in a pretty big way. Had no business sense whatsoever, just knew how to build fences. So we took a few projects on that were making really good money, and then we took one on that was not so good, and we got absolutely smashed by a big client. And they took nearly $500,000 out of me. Consequently, out of that, I had to fold the business and liquidate and go through all the trauma of that. We lost our home, lost a lot of good friends that I thought were good friends that were working with me, and basically had to restart the whole show again. And this time, a lot smarter. A lot different. I reset up this time in a different business model. I did things completely different. I now have the Profitable Fencer running as a coaching business as well, teaching fencers all over the world to basically shore up their profit first and how they do sales and things like that to make sure they actually make money, that rather than just go out and dig holes for a living. And the big thing here in Australia, Alex, I suppose, is anybody with a digger or a ute or a utility truck, pair of scissor shovels and a crowbar can go out and start a fencing business. And there's not a lot of regulation around the fencing business here in Australia at the moment. So one of the big things, probably about 5 years ago, I joined a group called the Fencing Industry Australia, and it's starting to really ramp up here in Australia, and we're vying for a trade recognition, and that way we can then bring apprentices on, younger kids, into the construction game and teach them properly how to do not only fence but how to run a business. And that's where the Profitable Fencer has sort of come in. So just flipping back quickly to North Coast Fencing, I set that up. Once we lost our home and everything else, I just went back on my own as a sole trader, digging holes on my own. My son-in-law, I think he felt sorry for me. He came in with me for a little bit, and so he stayed. He was concreting at the time. He came in and stayed with me for 5 years, and I trained him up. And then he's just gone out on his own, and a couple of my old supervisors that I had, they've come back to me, and we've worked. One in particular has stayed with me for a long time, and we started building the business up in a different way again, to the point that 7 years down the track, I've just I've just hit the $1 million turnover, so to speak, with three of us. So three workers. And I've got some even better news. I've just had a big building construction company buy into me for 50% profit share. Paid me a mozza for that, and we're just about to expand into the full-on construction regime again, from basically like where I was. So we're setting right up. We've just bought a big property. We're going to set a factory up again, and a shop front, and do all that again. So I've sort of gone full circle in the last 7 years, but it's been a 30-year journey, if I can say that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm glad. Well, thanks for sharing that story for one. You shared parts of it, the last time we spoke, and pretty amazing comeback story, I'd say. And I'm glad things are going well. That some of the news you just shared there, I hadn't heard. So, did all of that kind of happen within these last couple of weeks, or
Yeah,
the
it's the last little bit I've sort of kept it under wraps. It's been happening. I've been talking to this construction company for probably 12 months or so, maybe
Gotcha.
a bit longer, but everything's just come together in the last month, and yeah, it's really exciting. It's actually going literally full circle for where I was, but because I'm actually going back into the same place, to the same factory where I used to rent before, and it's quite surreal, because this time I'm going back as the owner, not a renter, not a leasee. So we've actually bought the whole property, and we're moving forward that way. And being I've been really sort of working hard on picking the right people this time. I've really dialed in my hiring process, and that's been a big part of what I want to achieve and what my goals are in the long run. And I just want to sort of make it known to the fences that are out there just working solo or in teams of two, and might be struggling here and there, that you've got to have a bigger picture and a bigger vision for yourself to know where you want to go, rather than just go out there every day and flog yourself,
Yeah.
into the ground. Because if you don't, it just gets too hard. Like, it is a very physical and demanding job, and I love it. I love the whole fencing world now. I love what it brings to me, and I love the freedom it brings to me as well. But one of the things I really have to emphasize is, if you don't have that sort of big vision and have a plan to get there, mate, you're just all over the shop.
Yeah. 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 That makes sense. Well, I mean, what I mean, kind of touched on this, but I mean, when you went from, your fencing business to creating the profitable fencer, I mean, can you just kind of go in a little bit more, like how that, I guess, what made you like decide to make the plunge and start a new business? I mean, was there anything where you just kind of like you got back into you started this new business, after your troubles you had previously, and you started to just realize, those hard learning mistakes, I guess, you made, you knew to fix them, and you just kind of thought you had a good system developed and you wanted to share that?
Yeah, it's yeah, it was really the first thing I did when I started coaching tradesmen, and in tradesmen around the construction industry, like carpenters and bricklayers and fencers and um, landscapers and whatever. And basically anybody who was in the trades, I would reach out to and coach. And I started doing that before my business actually fell over. And what I found was, because I was going through such a hard time myself, I didn't have a lot of time to focus on the actual coaching. But I set up a Facebook group, and it was called the Tradies Bar at the time, And I started bringing tradesmen in, and they were all having similar stories and similar things that were happening in their life. They weren't getting paid on time. They couldn't collect money. They didn't know how to invoice. There was all these little things that just didn't add up. And I thought, oh yeah, look, I've been there, I've done that, and this is how I've got around it. But then when I started to fall over, telling my story to the group was more of a mental outreach for me. It was more of a, this is what's happening. I didn't go to psychologists or anything else. I was just telling it to the world. This is what's happened. It was literally written in a contract of mine that I was getting paid an item that the company reneged on. And um, I went to barristers and I went to lawyers and I did all that sort of stuff. And it was like, yeah, Simon, you're going to win this case, but it's going to take 10 years and it's going to cost you 20 grand every time we go to court. We'll do that 3 or 4 times a year. And they're just going to drag it out till you got nothing left. And it was like, they've already dragged my cash flow out of me. I've lost my home. I'm here. I haven't got anything left. What else can they do? So it was throw your hands in the air, lay down, or get up and fight and go again. So I decided to do that. And then I think in Australia in 2017, 18, there was something like 20,000 small businesses went to the wall. Now, that may not sound a lot for your size of your country, but for a country of 20 million people, and small business is the backbone of Australia. We make up the majority of the economy. To see 20,000 hit the wall is bloody terrible.
Yeah.
So that's basically, yeah, I said, right, well, I've got to start again. How do I do it? And how do I do it better? That was the big thing. And I searched around for such a long time of how to sort of reset myself and how to reset the business. How do I do things differently? And I stumbled across a book called Profit First for Tradies. And Katie Griswold Smith, she's been on one of my podcasts, actually. That was another thing that I started at the time. Everyone was telling me that I've got the group, and to get myself out there, I've got to do the podcast. So I started A Fencer's Life, Lessons from the Trenches, and I started telling my story on that. And yeah, I met Katie. She come on and we talked about a few things, and she introduced me to Profit First for Tradies. And that's based on her development with a book by Mike Michalowicz in America, and he had Profit First. So, and at the time, what sort of drew me to her was I love Mike Michalowicz. I've read a lot of Mike Michalowicz's books, his business books, The Pumpkin Planner. I've got 2 or 3 of his other books, and just some of his analogies of sort of growing a business like an agricultural plan was sort of resonated with me well, and I could understand it. Whereas I used to read a lot of other business books, I just couldn't understand, and I just didn't gel. So I started this whole Profit First business and set my business up in a different model. And now we're more profitable than ever. And based on 2 or 3 fellas, as I said, we're just about to hit the $1 million mark. I think we're about 6,000 off it with a month left to sort of run before our financial year finishes. And tipping the scales at making, I think we're averaging about 40 to 50% gross profit at the moment, which is
nice.
Something I've never done.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I just keep honing in on the little steps that we're going, and I keep remembering one of the big things I really have to check myself on is I keep wanting to fall back into what I used to do.
Mm-hmm.
And because that was so common for so long, and it was just work harder. And it was like, nah, I don't want to work harder anymore. I'm getting too old. My body hurts too much. So I've got to work a lot smarter. And yeah, so I've just set up a lot of processes and protocols, and basically I then set up the Profitable Fencer and wrote a video course there. I used to do that on a 12 monthly basis, and I've sort of brought it down now to a conducive 16 to 20 weeks. There's a heap of templates, there's a video. I think there's 12 sections in the course. They go for about half hour, from the basics of the fundamentals and all the way down to an exit strategy and systems, and how you can probably get out of the business if you want to get out of the business, but doing it in a good way where it sort of helps your bank balance more so than just giving it all to the tax man, or doing what we see a lot of fencers do, is they work all their life and then just shut their business down because they retire. And it's like, well, you've done all that, you've worked 60 to 70% of your life, and you've had this asset all the way through, and you just shut it down. Why not sell it? Why not get it to a stage where somebody can take it on, or you have that legacy you can leave to your kids if they want to take it on. So and that's been something that I'm really passionate about, the fencing business, and moving that around now. With the Profitable Fencer, I have a Facebook group. I think there's 1,800 fencers in it from globally at the moment. Yeah, so there's a lot from America and Canada. There's it's called the Fence Posts, the group. So for all your listeners out there, they want to join that, flick over and have a look. But it's just basically like to give you an idea of the different or the vast range of experience. And in America, I think you guys have 40,000 registered fencers. In Australia, that's in your population, 230 million or whatever you've got over there. In Australia, we have 23 million. We have 4,000 registered fencers. So it's a really big difference. And really, one of the big things I've seen a lot in the fencing industry, and I don't understand it, but if you're doing well, somebody wants to sort of knock your feet out from under you. They want to look at your work. They want to criticize your work. They want to bag you out, and be so critical. And it's like, why not help each other? We're all in this industry together. There's so much work around. So why not help each other elevate yourself and become better? And that's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah. You have that abundance mindset. I feel like we're all, at least definitely the case for me, almost like you're pre-programmed to not have that mindset, where you just think like, oh, if you don't get something or if you get something someone else loses, when in reality, like you said, there's plenty to go around. And there's really nothing productive about destroying somebody online or just like ruin. That's so normal these days. I mean, it just blows my mind. It's like, one, why would you bother doing that? Like, why would you just like criticize someone that much? And two, why do you have the time to do that? Like, and why are you just using all your time to do that?
I see it all the time in some of the other groups. I'm a member of a lot of groups, and you'll get a newbie come in and ask a question, and one of the big questions I see in Australian groups is they'll ask for rates. How much are you charging for this, and how much are you charging for that? And look, that's a bit of a shortcut for folks who just don't know how to charge or haven't worked out what their rates are. But or sometimes it's just to gauge themselves if they're in the market. But the market will tell you whether or not you're whether you're on the money, because they'll either buy from you or they won't. If you're too dear, they won't, and if you're too low, or you don't perceive to be that type of business that they want, they just won't buy from you.
Yeah.
So and I've always felt here, even in my local area, there's probably 15 fences in my area of 40,000 people. Two or three shops. There's two shops. I was the third shop. I'm now going back in to be the third shop, but I sort of have a different range. So even when I had the shop before, I didn't really do a lot of retail. I was more supply and erect, supply the job and fit the job. Whereas the other shops mainly supply materials to other
Yeah.
contractors and things
Yeah.
like that. So there's a little bit of a point of difference, and I think you have to have that point of difference in your business as well. And again, for your listeners that are out there, one of the big things you've got to know first is you've got to know your value and what you're worth.
Yeah. 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 Absolutely. And I mean, what would you say some of the most common challenges you are seeing? I mean, I guess from maybe not the newbies, like you were saying, but more established businesses, one like your size, maybe, what are other businesses, what are they typically asking? I mean, what kind of things are they really struggling with the most typically?
The one thing that everybody's struggling, and this seems to be global, is with employees. That is the number one
Yeah,
foremost question that I hear, and I talk to fences all day, every day, and it's we're not growing because we can't get reliable staff, or we can't do this and we can't do that, and there's a couple of reasons for that, I believe, and I think since the big global shutdown we had a couple of years ago. In Australia, there was a lot of government money handed out, so it was too easy to stay at home and not work. That's number one.
same here.
And yep, and I don't think a lot of people have sort of really got their head around moving forward on that. And like, why go out and work in the weather and do hard physical work when you can sit on the lounge and and get by. It's more so, if it was a little bit harder and you couldn't get by, well, then you'd be forced to get out and earn a crust. But I think it's that. I think the award rates that we pay aren't in Australia. They've made it really hard. Like for me, if I'm out doing rural fencing or ranch fencing, as you call it over there, versus residential fencing, I think the pastoral award is for a casual is around the $20, 22, maybe $23 an hour. It's pretty cheap, but it's when you move over into the residential and domestic, it becomes a modern building award in Australia, and it's a start rate is for a kid who's never picked up a shovel or anything in his life can come in and work for us for $29.80 an hour.
Hmm.
And
Wow.
it's difficult then to pay laborers who don't know what they're doing, um, high money because you need to produce a product and get it out as quick as you can. And a lot of people still erect and charge by the foot or by the meter, um, or by the section. I've sort of got a method of working it out. I run cost analysis templates on every job I do, and I never used to, but I work every job out for every bit of material down to the last nail, and then break it all down to a meter rate, and then I can sort of know that I'm covered. So if I need, if you've got 10 sections and you need 10 and a half sections, you've got to buy the 11th section sort of thing. And it's a lot of fences will get caught out on that, and they charge by the meter, and they haven't factored in that, yeah, well, you've actually bought your 11 sections and you're out of pocket.
Yeah.
So um, so pricing's been a big thing, but the labour's been a very critical issue as well.
Gotcha. Okay. Um, so I mean, when you're actually coaching, fencing businesses, I mean, is there anything you can kind of tell, like what you should expect? I mean, how you kind of handle the process, from the very beginning? I mean, kind of I guess the initial steps, and then anything about the training in general too, like how you
Yeah, look,
well.
with my coaching, I don't coach any physical type in installations. If fencers want to come in and ask me questions about that, I can guide them for what I do and how I've done it for 30 odd years. And I'm even now I still learn new ways of doing things all the time. And in fact, I talk to Sean King, the Fence King, all the time, and Mr. Fence, I think he's called, and follow him with his no dig. It's going sort of gangbusters in America at the moment, and it makes sense. We don't have those products here yet in Australia, but I put my first no dig fence in a residential area the other day,
Oh, nice.
and um, had to sort of do it ad hoc, but it worked and it was good, and we finished the job in the day, and it was, yeah, rather than a 2 day job, we've done it in the day. It makes sense to get that way, and even doing no dig, we do a lot of that out in the rural area. We're thumping concrete posts or timber posts or star pickets or steel
Hmm.
line pickets. We're doing that anyway, but just bringing it over and getting that mentality into the residential market. Everyone's, oh no, we can't do it. There's not kosher. We're not going to do it. But so it's a big thing that's we've got to work on in Australia, and that's something I'm passionate about anyway. But and that's where the fencing industry is coming in to Australia at the moment, is having those. Um, we now have a skills committee um, in the industry. We have a fencing and gate automation task force. So they're bringing Australian standards to some of the things um, that we do every day that doesn't get recognized, but can actually impact somebody's life pretty massively if things go wrong. And because there's no standards about it, as I said, anybody with a pair of pliers and a trailer and a ute and a pair of shovels can come up and throw a gate in, runs on a motor. And as soon as you put a motor on it, it becomes a machine. And if that machine breaks under a court of law, where you're liable. And there's been children that over here that have been killed because gates have failed or things like that, and there's no regulation around it. So our industry is really moving in a good direction. But in short, to answer your question, the first thing I find when I talk to clients is they don't know where their numbers are. They don't know how to get their
Yep.
head around them, and I sort of work really hard on that. That's my first thing. The planning is my first. Like, what do you want to do? What do you want to get out of your business? Where do you want to go? How long do you want to be in it for? Is it just because it's a you can't sit around anymore and it's an easy fit? You can just go and start. How do what type of fence are you good at building? What type of fence are you most profitable at? And that changes. Um, can change with seasons. And that was a real wake up call for me when I had a coach 20 odd years ago, and he asked me what my conversion rate was then, and I said, I'm running around the countryside, I'm quoting, I'm winning all this work, and I thought it was about 80%. We worked the numbers out; it was 23%, and it was like, oh, okay, so I'm running around the countryside for a lot of fuel, a lot of time, and I'm not winning jobs. What the go?
Yeah.
My conversion rate now is about 38%, but I
Wow.
do a lot of different type of work, and the work I do is very profitable.
Yeah.
So I've chosen my niche market, and that's a big thing. And because I know my numbers now, I know what to target, and I know what I can get and what I can't get. And I know my competition comes in, and mate, they're 9 times out of 10 they're cheaper than me. So this is a big one I hear all the time from my clients is everybody's out there quoting. The small bloke's quoting cheap, and
Yep.
I
Yep.
can't get around him, and blah blah blah. And there's a real perception that cheap is good. It's not. It's normally the nastiest thing you can get. And whether you whether you're driving posts or using timber posts or steel posts or whatever, it's if you're doing quality work, you got to charge for it. It's
Yep.
just just the way it is. You got
Yeah.
to know what it costs you to get your blokes out in the field.
Yeah. Yeah. Like you said, I mean, that I was just going to say the same thing. It's going to affect everything in your business, including keeping your employees. Like if you're just
Yeah,
doing bottom of the barrel pricing, that's not extra money to retain, your existing employees too. So,
yeah.
um, and
That that's one of the big things, and I think that's where I fell over before was I had massive overdrafts. I was turning a massive amounts of money, but I didn't have my finger on the pulse of how much it was actually costing me to retain staff. And so because we were doing so much work and trying to get things in so quick, we end up chasing Peter to pay Paul, and there's no room for growth when you're doing that.
yep.
It's you're just busting yourself all the time to earn as much money as you can to get it in the gate, and then all of a sudden your processes fall off, your protocols fall off, your quality falls off, and you start doing callbacks, and that's costing you money, and it just spirals out of control. So you really got to jump on it and
Yeah.
get to know what it costs.
Yep. And especially with people being able to review your businesses, if you're just getting, scraping by and charging cheap and not getting the money you need to do the job the right way, all that's going to mean, if you mess it up or you kind of cut corners, I guess, then you're
Yeah,
going to get bad reviews, which is going to lead to all kinds of other problems. And, you rarely get bad reviews. I don't really see many for like being expensive, or being the expensive one. I don't know if I really ever have seen that.
yeah.
Probably
I
have.
got one.
Do
I
you?
got
Okay.
one. I got one from a repeat customer. Actually, he gave me a four-star rating out of five because he thought it cost too much. And look, that's fine. I don't, I get a lot of reviews, and I don't really care if some of them are negative, because I think it sort of makes your business look a little bit more
Yeah.
um, balanced. You can't please everybody. I understand that. And then doozy, um, I have some doozy clients as well. One of the things we get taught, I suppose, me being a bit older as well, is that the customer was always right. And then I had a general manager who used to come in and say, no, the employees are, you got to treat them right first because they're the backbone of your business and everything else. And I sort of went down that route for a long time, but I don't think that's exactly true either. They are the future of your business, and without them on the ground, you can't grow. I totally get that, but you can't let them walk all over you either. So I think there's a real fine balance
Yeah.
in between. Like, I'll go to bat if I have a client that's a client from hell, and I'll go to bat for my employees all day, every day. But I'll also pull them into line when they're out of line. And I think I think that's one thing that we see a lot of. People, if they get upset or anything, they just throw the towel in, walk away, and just quit their job and off they go. And it's sort of like, I don't understand that mentality. If every time something happened to me that it did go my way and I threw the towel in, I'd never get out of bed.
Yeah. It'd be
you
pretty
know?
quick.
Yeah, yeah. You just got to, we're in a hard game. And
Yeah.
as I said, everybody wants to ridicule you and everything else and tell you how bad you're doing, or you're doing it wrong. And it's like, it's like water off a duck's back with me. You just keep going.
Yeah. And taking a step back too. I mean, because I think every business owner is, I mean, if you haven't had problem customers or somebody that's getting on you about whatever, I mean, you haven't been in business very long. So there's always going to be somebody that's that has some kind of problem, I guess. And if you get very emotional and just like you said, just quit, I mean, it's probably unlikely I mean, it's definitely unlikely you're gonna ever have a business for one, but I mean, if you're just constantly getting emotional about everything and not at least, thinking about listening to what they were saying first too, and kind of being like, is this actually something we were doing wrong? Um, I would say in the very beginning, I would not do that as much, when I first started in the business, but now that's like the first go-to. Like I have to be like, all right, is this something that we should be fixing and fixing for future clients, or is it just like what is the problem? Because usually there's some kind of point, unless the person's just a complete jerk and, really just, is wrong in every way, I guess. But I guess taking
Yeah,
that step back has, helped me grow a lot and also fix and make the business better as well.
yeah. I think me in my early days, you know, I was always hot headed, and I'm a big
Yep.
bloke as well. I'm 6 foot 1, but I was pretty fit and solid, and I'd get cranky, and my staff used to reckon I'd go red in the face and cranky and get out of the way. They didn't want to talk to me, and um, as I've and I had one bloke turn around and say to me, he said, "It's your way or the highway." And I said, "Well, mate, my way works, and until you can show me that it doesn't work, it's we're doing it my way. It's the way it is." And now I have a lot of things with my staff, trainings, and that is that I'll teach them my way, and I expect you to do it my way until you can find a quicker and a better way to do it. And if you can, bring it to me, and then we'll adapt that way, and we move forward. So I listen to them a lot. But one of the things I found too is when my staff were a bit edgy, or upset, or something like that, and they could, you know, lose it over the littlest things on site, that might just not go their way, or the ground was a bit too hard, or there's a few rocks, and they just crack it. And I would normally hear about it, especially, well, because 90% of the time I'm with them, but now I'm stepping back more up into that CEO role as I'm growing again now. I've had to really let go a lot of the things. But one of the things I found with my employees is that when they're upset, there's normally something outside of work. It's normally not work
Yep.
related. Um, so yeah, it could be family issues at home with children or spouses, or
Yeah.
financials. All these little things add up, and the pressure gets on that they sort of crack. And if you're working with a bloke day in day out for a few years, you see you spend more time with them than their partners do,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
you see all the signs.
Yeah. And even with your customers, I mean, if they're going ballistic, or they're that mad, there's probably a really good chance it was something else as well.
Yeah,
That got them to the point that was just the tipping point. And I guess
yeah,
for better or worse, the business owner gets that a lot of times because they can't, they just kind of let it all out on you or whatever. But I do
yeah,
want to talk about that though with the customer service and I guess customer loyalty and really getting your business to a place where you're getting a lot of referrals. I mean, are there anything that you're teaching or you're doing with your business that has really like skyrocketed the customer loyalty that you have, creating or providing them an experience? Any little details that you're doing differently that you've noticed gets more referrals or makes the customer like that much more excited? Because there's things that I'm pretty obsessed with that with my business, like trying to find little things that kind of go a long way. Um, and even just like, new clients, we will send gifts to them basically. So like right as soon as you start with us, they get something in the mail that has food for like the whole team and like snacks and all that kind of stuff. And notice that like definitely helps add kind of that wow factor. So I was just kind of curious, um, with fencing. I mean, have you ever heard anything like that or implement anything like that that really has helped you get more referrals and more repeat business?
yeah. One of the things, and that's a really good question. I don't do gifts with my clients. I've never really thought about it like that. I have seen other companies outside the fencing industry do that, but with fencing, no. Like, for me, referrals is I have a referral link on all my invoices. I then have a follow up call with my clients to see if they were happy. Generally, before I send the invoice, and then I'll put a link there with them as well. I don't get as much as I probably should push, but my thought process is, and I think this is the biggest issue is I charge a lot of money for the service that I provide, and some people flat out just turn around and tell me that I'm too dear, whatever. I charge for my quotes for residential fencing. I charge a fee to go out on and do an on-site appraisal, and a lot of the old tradesmen who are retired turn around, oh, I've never charged for a quote in my life. I'm not paying for that, rah, rah. And I said, that's okay. You don't have to hire me to come out and do that. That's fine. I'm not your person for that job. And I knock back a lot of work just for that reason. So for those referrals, when I do win a job, I bend over backwards to make sure that job is spot on. Now that might mean I have a skeleton crew there, and it's going a little bit too slow. I have to beef more people into it, or it may mean that we are meticulous in cleaning up. We are polite verbally with the clients, so there's no loud music or swearing and cussing and carrying on. My blokes are in clean attire when they sort of turn up. So it's a whole presentation that we bring to the party, and that's if you're going to charge that, you want a premium price, well, you've got to give a premium quality, and there's no shortcuts. It might mean that my blokes are on site and I turn up with a bucket or an esky full of cold drinks for them. The client sees that. The client sees that I'm taking care of my people as well, so they can take care of you. It's all the little things.
Yeah.
It's not one big thing, if I can say that.
Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense. And yeah, I mean, I've definitely heard, fencing and decking businesses that kind of go to the job and they don't put on uniform, and it's not just look like a mess, I guess, pulling up in a truck and getting out, and you're not even sure who just showed up because there's no markings on the truck or there's no t-shirts they're wearing to let them know who it is. And it just kind of sets a bad example right from the start. So,
yeah, it can be really, it can be really difficult in doing that, and it can be, it can become expensive, for a crew or a new fencing setup to buy trucks and all that sort of stuff to get your blokes up to speed. But my advice is just to start with a plan, and you sort of work yourself out. If you can't afford uniforms for your blokes, just make sure you're in uniform, and then you might be able to buy magnets for their truck or whatever, so you can just start to look like. And as you build your business, you build that protocol, and you just put a little bit of money aside for the marketing and the uniforms and the systems that way.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and you mentioned marketing. What do you typically, I mean, I've seen your website, but what do you typically do, or what do you suggest, to coaching clients, like marketing wise? I mean, do you have any kind of, I guess, outline of what you typically recommend first, and, anything they do as they scale, next steps and things like that?
Yeah, I think for me, typically, I think you have to have a social media presence. So you've got to either have a Facebook business page or at least a Google My Business page.
Mm-hmm.
I find for me in my business, I very rarely respond to marketplace ads. Somebody's looking for a fencer in this area, blah blah blah, because I find that everybody swamps on that, and then you're actually fishing at the bottom of the barrel for that job anyway. So they're not my type of client. But I have a Facebook business page that I just put stuff on there. I probably don't do it enough. I spend all of my time in my group, my Facebook group for the fences. So my actual fencing page on North Coast Fencing, I just basically add photos to it. A review goes out every now and then. It goes out with each invoice as well. I have a link on that. I have a Google link and a Facebook link, so they've got a choice. But I find my clients generally will have already done their research via Google and found me that way and gone through a lot of my reviews down that track before they even pick up the phone to ring me. So half the time, like if you're proactive getting reviews for your business that way and building that client base up there, they're 90% sold before you you know
Yep.
before they pick up the phone.
Yep.
So yeah,
Yeah. That piece is huge. The reviews, because it's the best way you can become, so you're not a commodity basically. You can actually separate yourself. If you have more reviews, better reviews than these other people, a better website too, you're going to be standing out versus these other guys. And they're going to, like you said, 90%, they more or less want you to be the company they choose because you just blow everyone else away. And then if you add that presentation factor where the guy that comes out for the estimate or however you do it, you know, looks good and is professional and wearing a uniform of some sort, you're going to have a way easier time selling those more expensive fences versus the smaller guy. But if you're doing nothing different than them and you're still charging more, like
yeah.
it's gonna be an uphill battle.
Well, I think your branding is a really big important factor too. And one of the things I see a lot of is, for example, if you brand your company as your name, like if I go Simon Davis Fencing, that stays with me forever. You can't sell that off. You can't
Yeah,
move that off. I strategically called my business North Coast Fencing because I'm on the north coast of the New South Wales state here where I am on the eastern border. But it doesn't matter where I go up and down that east coast. If I set up in Sydney and still call myself North Coast Fencing, I would get all the work just north of me. So I could always move. So it was a really strategic plan for me to have a name that was not directly one area, but it was not
yeah,
linked to a name. Yes, I'm the face of the business, and people want to see me. But I have a website, my North Coast Fencing website. I haven't touched in 8 years, and I haven't done a thing to it. I don't do any SEO or anything else, but I'm still ranked number one in my area. But I'll get phone calls from 400 mile away, and they, oh, this is North Coast Fencing. I'm here. I'm just north of Sydney, or or go up the other way and up to Brisbane, sort of in Queensland, and it's, oh, you're North Coast Fencing. Can you do this? And I don't travel that far, but it's just that perception of that name that I'm on the North Coast, and I go, and you can have, that's a geographical position that I put myself in, and the name has done that for me. Whereas I see a lot of people, yeah, they just call themselves by their last name, Davis Fencing or whatever, and it's really hard to shift.
yeah. What
Nobody knows that.
is North Coast? Is that like a typical search term too? Like I mean, just an example here. I mean, I live in Maryland in the States, and Southern Maryland, people say that a lot. It's just like a common way of talking or, pointing out a general area. I mean, is North Coast like something that people search it often, or is it just,
No, what I find, people will generally go fencing Maryland, or fencing Lismore, or they'll type in the word fencing and then the area that they're
yeah,
in,
city? Yeah.
and all the city, yeah, suburbs, whatever, and that will come up. So if you can then sort of market yourself out and buy, um, get those areas for that SEO sort of down packed, and all the suburbs around it, you can sort of rank pretty high in that one area. And one of the big things that I work on with my clients is frequency and recency. So if you're frequently talking to your clients and to your prospects, they tend to remember you. So your councils, your public works, your maybe your government contracts, if you're going down that commercial sort of that commercial route. But then recent as well. So it's not just reaching out to people once and then forgetting them. If you constantly reaching out to them and recent, if you're the last person they've talked to, they're going to remember you, so to speak, if they're looking for a fencer. If you've done a quote for a client and then you've dropped it and then nothing else has happened, they may have had 10 other quotes gone through that system. But if you're the first quote and they've had 10 others, but you've rang them every couple of days or followed them up with emails or a newsletter or something like that, and you're frequent and you're recent, they go, oh, this bloke's professional, or this company's professional, they're all over it. The others aren't doing this. I think we need to go here. And
Yeah.
then price doesn't really come into it a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good point. And to kind of expand on that, you can do a lot of that with marketing too. I mean, so you already probably know, and I know a lot of people hate it, but retargeting is a very real thing. And
Yeah.
somebody reaches out through your website or they find your social media page, you can follow them around too.
Yeah.
And basically, show yourself. And that's really what it takes, or what research says, I guess. Somebody has to see your business many times and have a lot of touch points. I think
Yeah.
it used to be 7 and now it's like double or more because everyone sees ads constantly on social media. But if you're running different types of ads, if you're on Google, it's just more touch points. If you're doing emails, if you're calling like you're
Yeah.
talking about, that's how you're gonna separate people. Because yeah, otherwise everyone just forgets you. They're just gonna.
Yeah.
And if you have 10 other quotes, or even 5 other quotes, or 3 other quotes, and one person is doing a lot better than you in a lot of ways, then they're gonna remember them a lot more easily than you. So
Yeah. One of the big things I find with governments, if it's over a certain amount of money for a job, they have to get 2 quotes or sometimes 3 quotes. But with the residential, and if you don't qualify your clients, and this happens all the time, people will ring up, and if you're jumping on the phone every time the phone rings, jump out, and I'm going to race out and do this quote, you're just burning your energy for no reason. But if you qualify that client first, A, to see if they're in your niche, B, to see, like what type of fence they want to do, and what area they're in. C, ask them what budget they've got. And if they turn around and say, oh, look, we just need 3 quotes, or we're getting 4 quotes or whatever, first thing I do is I go, I'm not your person. I'm not your company.
yeah,
And why? Because I'm not going to be the cheapest. If you're price shopping, it's not me. I don't want to work with you. Same thing with charging for quotes. If you're not going to pay, $100 for a quote for me to jump in my car, spend an hour to drive out, and then come back and put it all up on a computer and run it through professionally, you're not going to spend 10 grand. And a lady had a dig at me the other day and said, oh, well, you must be losing so much work. And I said, well, on the contrary, I'm booked out for 6 or 7 months. I'm not losing any work. I just pick my work,
yeah. And you got
and I
better
was like,
jobs.
yeah, I just get better jobs.
Yeah,
And, I can work less for more.
yeah,
It's why go out and, win 30 jobs and, make nickel and dime stuff out of it when you can go out and win 10 jobs and make thousands out of it.
yeah, yeah. And you kind of touched on a point there. I was curious. One of the biggest problems, I do hear employees, it's problem hiring. And I don't know why I'm blanking on the second one that you said, but that one I remember hearing a lot. But another one that's probably number one that I hear the most, or the biggest problem that I see, like when I talk with fencing or decking, is the speed to lead. So a lot of people will wait, an hour or multiple hours or a day to reach back out to somebody. And that just, they do studies on that. It just cripples, your conversion rates and the amount of leads you get, or amount of leads you
Yeah.
close. So do you hear stuff like that as well? I mean, has that ever been a problem in your business? You speak
It
anything to
it
that?
it is a massive problem in our business. What I find here in my particular area, and why one of the things that I win a lot of work is because I respond to every email or every phone call that comes my way. I may not be able to do the job, but I still qualify them, or I pass them on to other fences that I know if it's in their sort of alley. But I find quite regular that a client will ring me and say, look, I've been looking for a fencer for 18 months. I can't get anybody. Nobody will return my call. You're the first one that's reached back out to me or answered my call. You've got the job. I said, well, I haven't given you a price yet. It doesn't matter. Just come and do it. Okay. So that you know, and then you've got to sort of slow them down and go, right, well, do you have a budget? You know, do you know what value you're sort of looking at? And you've sort of got to, right, I'll come out the door quote, or do this, or do the bid, do the estimate, and you can then basically know you've won the job. You've just got to you don't want to go out and do a job and then hand them a bill and go, oh no, they fall backwards, you know. So you've got to sort of prep them first and pre-warn them where they're at. But yeah, speed to lead is massive. And first, in my immediate area, we've got a big influx of work. So we got smashed with the drought. First was terrible. So it was like a 10-year drought, and I think I had probably 3 days of rain that I missed work in that 10 years. And
Jeez.
then
wow.
Then we had the fires come through, and they went right through the whole East Coast. So that decimated our timber supply. And and then we had what come first? Then we had the COVID come through. So that punched all the raw steel and supplies through the roof. So everything doubled, tripled overnight across the board. You know, people fighting in the streets for toilet paper and things like that. You know, it was ridiculous. And then the year after sort of COVID finished, we had the biggest flood we've ever had up and down the East Coast, and the biggest one we've ever had in Lismore. And it decimated farms everywhere and buildings, and it was like a ghetto. It was like a war zone here where the floods went through. Probably much to your tornado alley. It was like that. We've had cyclones that have been off the coast that have never come down this far, and you know, rip houses to pieces and things like that as well. But with the floods and the rain, it's been really really hard. So there's been such a big influx of work after that. New buildings going up, fences going up everywhere, all of that stuff. That was 2 years ago. Pardon me. We still haven't recovered fully in our area from those floods. The shops in Lismore, there was probably 1 out of 4 returned to open up. Now they're back up, just getting up to about the 3 mark, and nearly back to full capacity. Not quite, but we've had the last 6 or 7 weeks, we've had rain every day again. So I live on a hill, a mountaintop, and I sort of drive back down into the valley, into town, and you can just see water everywhere. And we're not talking about massive amounts of rain, but we're talking about rain that's constant enough to everywhere you walk is mud. I've never seen my hill here in the 7 years I've been here, water running out of the top of the hill like it is, and just so soggy where you stand. Even when we had the big floods, it wasn't this wet up here on the hill. So our ground is saturated. It's I drove around with my leading hand yesterday to take him to all these different jobs and say, right, this is your job list. There's about 10 jobs here. We couldn't get on any of them. They were so wet. You just couldn't even get a truck anywhere near the place. I had my 4-wheel drive ute and drove out there, and I nearly got bogged in that. It was just so wet. So that slows your workflow down, and you're trying to find things that sort of happen. But it's if you're doing residential fencing, I can sort of get into those, but I find they're not necessarily my niche market anymore. For me, I sort of push into more the small acreage fences and do a lot of farm fencing, a lot of 3 rail fencing and things like that. So when they're ringing me all the time saying, "Hey, I need a new gate entrance or whatever," I've just employed or just about to employ a stonemason, so you can do a lot of rock walls. So I
Nice.
just keep value adding to my business,
Yeah.
bringing the people in that I can't do rock walls, I can't lay bricks, that's not my forte.
Yeah.
But these blokes can. But now I can offer it in my business, so I can upsell.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, yeah, I know, I think we got through about all the questions I had. I mean, is there any additional nuggets of wisdom or insights, anything you'd like to share?
I suppose that the big thing that comes to mind is you've got a plan. You've got a plan for you've got to plan for the worst and hope for the best, I suppose. But if that's one thing that I used to think a lot of. But if you don't plan, generally the worst will happen. It's
Yeah.
you know what I mean. So what's the saying is um, fail to plan, plan to fail.
Yeah.
So
Failing to plan is planning to fail, right?
yeah, or is it the other way around? Yeah, something like that. But it's basically if you plan and you have foresight, you can then hindsight's a marvelous thing. But if you can have foresight to see where things are going, if you can follow your numbers and really dig into those and find out where your low spots are, or your low months, you might be your low circulation of your financials. It'll come in ebbs and flows. So if you can follow when you're quiet and ramp up beforehand. I know you guys have a massive snow season and frost season, so we don't have that here.
Hmm.
Pardon me. So that doesn't affect us. But if in those times people are doing out doing other things, or they shut their fencing business down or whatever. So here in Australia we fence 24/7. We just we don't have a
Yeah.
downtime really.
Yeah.
um, I can see on my charts when my um, my quieter months are. I can earn massive months in July and August, and I know my busy times because that's when it heats up for us here in Australia. We go from August to December is our Christmas time is our busiest time. Everybody wants to have a fence done before Grandma comes for dinner, so so you're flat out doing all those things trying to go through, but you might spend a lot of money in one peak, and then you've got a lay period before you actually get the money in. So if you can sort of spread those times out and balance it a little bit, or know when they're coming, just be aware. You can plan around it.
Yeah, that's great insight. I mean that was pretty much all the questions I have for you, Simon. This went really well, and I think everything you shared was really amazing and valuable to everyone that's listening as well. But I just want to thank you for coming on the podcast and sharing those experiences and giving us a lot of insight into kind of your journey, but also what you're seeing because you obviously are seeing a lot of different issues, whether it's somebody you're coaching or your Facebook group or I'm sure family and friends, all kinds of stuff. You're pretty involved in the fencing world, so I think everyone got a lot of value from this episode. So thank you for coming on the podcast. I do appreciate
Yeah,
it.
thanks,
Yep, and
thanks, Alex.
uh,
It's one of the big things, mate. I think globally fencing is the same. We dig holes, we put posts in the ground, and just it depends on what you're joining between them, but it's the same worldwide. It's one industry that we can say is the same, and business is business. You've got to be you've got to be smart about it, and you've got to be logical about it. Too many times we become emotional about it because it's, we're dealing with our own money. So, but mate, yeah, it is something that I am really passionate about. And thanks, Alex, for letting me come on the show and
Yeah.
let me share my story. It's great.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's been fun, and glad we could work it out with these crazy time difference because it's getting a little bit later here, but it's day's just getting started there. But you know, for everyone listening, going forward with this podcast, we're going to be continuing to do the weekly podcast. I'm working on getting a bunch of new guests, great guests like Simon. And actually, before I continue, Simon, is that going through the website the best place to get in touch with you, or Facebook page? What are you thinking?
Yeah, if they come through the you can find me in a couple of ways. You can listen to the my podcast. It's A Fencer's Life: Lessons from the Trenches. It's on Spotify and Google. You can join the Fence Post Facebook group. So that's the Fence Posts. And also you can find me on the profitable www.theprofitablefencer.com.
Perfect. So yeah, plenty of options there. And yeah, going forward, that's if you guys are liking these episodes, you're enjoying the content that we're doing, if it's providing value, the guests that are coming on are providing value, if you could leave a review and subscribe to the podcast to be a big help to the show as we try to, rank higher and all that fun stuff on all the different podcast platforms. But if anyone does have any questions about their business with marketing, specifically, welcome to reach out to us as well. Speak with someone from our team and me personally at deckfencemarketers.com. That's our website. And we are just constantly providing free content for fencing and decking companies. So if you're looking for more free stuff, you can check out our webinars we do every month. And then social media, we get posts every day, different videos that'll just different information to help you. So Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn. Be sure to check that out if it interests you. But if not, no worries. And yeah, thanks for listening. And Simon, thanks for being on the podcast.
Thanks, champ. Good to
All right,
talk to you, Alex.
Yep, take care.